welcome everyone who's watching to the first of 5 Tidal Bay sessions where we are tasting through the 2020 vintage of Tidal Bay. 2020 was a really great year, a really great growing year. Maybe some folks would say differently, but I've heard from certain winemakers that it was a record year. So tasting these Tidal Bays is a real treat. It's one of the first things that you really get to try from our area. It's one of the first releases of wine, perhaps, from some wineries. So today we have with us 3 winemakers. We have Gina Haverstock, who's the winemaker for Jost, Gaspereau, and Mercator, but today she's representing Jost, so she'll be tasting through the Jost Tidal Bay. We have Ben Swetnam, who is with Avondale Sky, and we have Ken, or Kenneth, but Ken today, I think. You're not in trouble. Ken McClellan from Eileanan, Brèagha.
Eileanan, yeah.
Eileanan. There's phonetic spelling of this on the back of your wine bottle, if you care to know. I've said it different every single time I've said it, but they are a beautiful winery up in Cape Breton, and the view is one of the most spectacular in the province, I think. So if you're up that way, check it out. So Tidal Bay is a wine style. We have now 14 wineries making Tidal Bay in this province, showing really the best expression of what we can do here. I think it's a beautiful, crisp, light, approachable, food-friendly wine. And we started doing it in 2010, folks. Is that accurate?
Yeah. The soft launch with 6 wineries happened in 2000 and with the 2010 vintage, and then the full official launch happened with the 2011 vintage.
So went from 6 wineries producing Tidal Bay to 14 this year. And any of you are welcome to chime in with this, but not necessarily your wine in particular, but what should a person expect anytime they're picking up any of the Tidal Bays?
Well, I mean, Tidal Bay, the whole idea was that it would kind of represent Nova Scotia in a bottle. I think it's meant to be that really, fresh, crisp, easy drinking style that Nova Scotia does so well, and also really show off that kind of proximity to the ocean, that saline minerality, but also that really great ability to pair with any kind of Nova Scotia seafood, as well as a ton of other different.
So the word appellation wine is thrown around a lot when we talk about Tidal Bay, and I'm sure that there are some folks here that might not really understand what that means. Like, what is an appellation wine? Does someone wanna go at that?
Ben, I'll let you take that again, buddy.
Okay. Well, sure. So an appellation style, it's kind of modeled after the classic European way of doing things within different wine regions. So appellations that people would be, pretty familiar with would be things like Burgundy or Bordeaux or Châteauneuf-du-Pape. I don't know why I just went with French there, but the appellation system basically sort of says, like, these particular varieties, this particular style is what works best with our region, our soil types, all of the things that kind of define terroir. And so it's not something that's been super common outside of Europe, but they've been doing appellation systems in Europe for quite a while. And Tidal Bay was, I believe, the first of its kind in Canada to use that sort of appellation model.
And the appellation is all of Nova Scotia. So the area that is approved for the appellation or for Tidal Bay is all of Nova Scotia. And coinciding with that is that the grapes have to be 100% Nova Scotian.
So you can't be buying juice from other provinces or other grape growers that are not here and blending it into your wine. Someone that's a winery in Ontario can't make something and put the word Tidal Bay on it, just like we can't take our sparkling wine here and put the word champagne on it. It has to be traditional method sparkling or sparkling wine. Yeah. And you all know this, but just for y'all at home that might be wondering. Yeah, so Tidal Bay has become a staple of summer for a lot of people in Nova Scotia. A really great patio wine. I can't wait to indulge in some next week. It's really light, really approachable, really fun. But it also can have like a lot of complexity, a lot of minerality, as much as it is easygoing and crushable. So I think it's it's a really great wine to represent our province. So I think that if we want to start off the tasting, and then we'll get a bit into the history of Tidal Bay afterwards, that might be good. So I think that as far as the tasting goes, I hope that all of you at home were able to pick up, one or two or all three of these wines in liquor stores that are near you. So we'll be starting with the Jost Tidal Bay. So if you want to pour yourself a glass of that and we can taste it together, Gina will tell us a little bit about how hers was made and what that year was like.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about Tidal Bay. It represents Nova Scotia, and I think we're all Nova Scotia proud here. So I'm going to pour a little glass here, and we'll get right into the 2020 Jost Tidal Bay.
Cheers, everybody. Just look at that. Look at that distortion on my face.
Oh, wow. I didn't know what that was, actually.
Scary.
Lovely. So right away, Tidal Bay has, a bright kind of light straw color, something I often skip over when I'm doing a tasting, but I thought I would be, more professional and start right with the color. I love talking about the nose of Tidal Bay. I think true to the style, we all talked about it, but terroir driven, mineral driven, those are the kind of things, and aromatic, those are the kind of things that Tidal Bay should be. It has to, as Ben said, I think, encapsulate Nova Scotia. He said in the bottle, I say in the glass, same thing. But it has to express sort of life here in Nova Scotia and the climate here in Nova Scotia. So right away on the Jost Tidal Bay, I get nice minerality. For those of you that don't know Jost Vineyards, we're right on the Northumberland Strait, and in Malagash, now known as the North Shore. They've changed the name, actually, the province did. But we're halfway down the coast between Amherst and Pictou. And you can be sitting or in the vines at Jost Vineyards, a north-facing slope, and look right across the strait, the Northumberland Strait, to PEI. So we're right on the ocean. I would say probably our closest vines, which happen to be our Tidal Bay Lac-Qui block, are less than 500 meters from the ocean. So just to give you a sense. So it does seem suitable that it has a mineral-driven nose, and Ben had mentioned salinity. I think that comes through. But as well as that, we've got some great fruit aromatics. I always get apple, pear, and of course I was tasting it a little before we started, and I always find new aromatics that come out in the glass every time I taste Tidal Bay. But right now I've been tasting a lot of nectarine, one of my favorite fruits, or smelling, I should say. And then there's an underlying floral note, maybe a hint of rose or fresh spring flowers under there as well for me. And on the palate, I'm sure the sound of that was terrible for everyone's ears. Sorry about that.
No, it was wine ASMR. It's great.
We do, huh?
People know what ASMR is, but it's just weird sounds.
Oh, okay. But we do that tasting, just get the coat the wine around our mouth, get it to all our taste receptors. And also it helps to coax a lot of the aromatics that are in the wine up the back of our throat to our nose in a different way, called retronasally. I love to throw that word around just to you can throw that out in a party, a scene, and see what people say of retronasally.
See if they start to avoid you after.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that could happen. That could happen. Us winemaker folks, we get a little geeky sometimes. In any case, what I'm getting on the palate, right away is that bright acidity, bright and refreshing, but not overpowering. So it is quite approachable and soft while still being refreshing on the palate.
Tina, what would you say to people? How would you describe how you perceive acidity when you taste a wine?
I know a lot of people will say I get it only on the sides of my tongue, and I think that was there was a tasting what's the word I'm looking for? A translated picture of a tongue. I think we probably all learned it in school, where the acids I think it's on the side or in the sides, and bitterness is in the back, and sweetness is in the front. We have taste receptors all over our tongue and even other parts of our mouth that actually taste everything. It's just the perception of where you might feel it. So generally kind of it makes you salivate and kind of on the sides of the mouth, but just about everywhere.
Yeah, some people have told me that, or years ago when I was studying wine a little bit more, that when you taste a wine and it's quite acidic, after you swallow and you put your mouth down, there's like a lot of flow of saliva going to the front of your mouth. Or that reminding yourself of what is acidic and being like, okay, is this like biting into a green apple or whatnot? For those of you at home that are like, how do I know when a wine's acidic? It's hard to taste kind of like in a vacuum. You're tasting this right now. We're going to taste all fairly acidic wines. But if you had this beside like a fairly round, buttery Chardonnay or something that had some oak aging, it wouldn't feel quite the same, I guess.
I think I get that question. You're right. So acidity is lemon is acidic. And I love, and we noted as sour, but I find sometimes acidity can get spoken about in a negative connotation, but acidity is what makes everything refreshing, what brings aromatics to life, and what really helps a wine pair well with food. So if you knocked back some of that brightness in our mouth, it wouldn't go with the seafood and shellfish that it goes so well with now. So I embrace that bright, refreshing note. I think it's
big time. Like, I think that Nova Scotia has changed the way that I drink, at least, where now, because I drink so much Nova Scotia wine, and we do have a bright acidity because of our climate in a big way, that now when I drink a lot of other wines, I'm like, but there's not quite enough acid. But I think it's just my palate has really changed because of how lively our wines are. And I think that's amazing. So that has a lot of acidity. It's a good thing.
It's I think it reflects us. We're lively people. We need to have a wine that's just as lively, representing us. So and so finishing off on the palate, there is it's a balanced acidity. So there's a hint of sweetness just to balance things out, make it even more food approachable. And a nice, I find a kind of a medium finish, so it stays in your mouth a little bit, with some lemon and some of that minerality and a hint of that nectarine for me at the finish. So I know we said it before, but I do really think Tidal Bay and seafood and shellfish that come from our shores are it's a perfect pairing. Just so lovely. The minerality in common, the freshness. Who needs a squeeze of lemon on your fish and chips when you have a beautiful Tidal Bay to cleanse your palate and pair with it so well. So that is the 2020 Jost Tidal Bay. I just wanted to say one thing. I've been I'm the head winemaker at Jost Vineyards, and I oversee the winemaking. But of course, winemaking doesn't happen, at least at Jost Vineyards, by one person. We've got a team, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Dave Beardsall. He's been with the company, with Jost Vineyards. It's his 30th year. Ben and Ken, I think and I need to be Jen because there's Ben and Ken, but I'm sure, I know Ben, you know Dave. I'm not sure, Ken, if you know Dave, but he's a hard worker and he's got a great team in the cellar. So yeah, that goes to show that there's some history there. So I'm proud to represent the team.
Yeah, and you make a lot of amazing wines with your team, and it's impressive that now you are the head winemaker of all three of those spots. I mean, you were with Gaspereau for years and making what I think are some of the best Rieslings in the province and amazing stuff, but it's so nice to see you making like this huge portfolio of wines even better. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. That's lovely. Still with Gaspereau too, though.
Oh yes, yeah. I wasn't saying that you weren't. Just like you've expanded. You've gone from just Gaspereau to like, you know, having your wings around all of them, and yeah, lots of quality.
Oh, thanks, Jess.
Great. Well, I finished a lot of that glass. Hope everyone enjoyed that. And now we'll move on to Ken McClellan. I'm going to try it again from Eileanan, Brèagha.
Eileanan? Eileanan.
Eileanan, Brèagha. And we're going to taste along with you. So if everyone wants to pour themselves a bit of that Tidal Bay. I have half bottles of all of mine because I passed some of mine on to a friend so that she could also taste along this evening. So I didn't drink half of all these bottles before I got on the call, as much as make it from my pronunciation of Ken's Winery.
I might have drank half of mine before this one.
That's why
you're allowed, I guess.
Beautiful.
Me too, Ken. Me too.
That's true, yeah.
Actually, sorry, Ken, before we move on, I forgot that I was gonna like open up the floor for questions after each wine. So if anyone that's listening has any, we're gonna open up the chat for questions generally at the end of this whole session about the history and whatnot. But if there's anything you want to specifically ask Gina about the Jost Tidal Bay, throw them in the chat and we can read those off. But if not, that's totally fine. I actually have one question for you, Gina. What is your blend this year in your Tidal Bay? Just because there are 20 allowable grapes right now in Tidal Bay, you don't have to use all of them, but I'm sure that people lean towards liking certain ones with certain blends. So can you tell us a bit about yours?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess as usual, the Jost Tidal Bay is over 50% Lacadie. And I think I mentioned that the Lacadie Tidal Bay block at Jost Vineyards is, within 500 meters from the ocean. So a really nice spot. We chose that Lacadie, and it's, if you want to know the exact percentage, you have to do a quick cheat, but 56%, but just over 50% of that blend. So and we chose that block because it just carries a nice minerality and a nice elegant fruit forwardness. And so we have GM 318, Cayuga, Osceola, and Muscat, all, give or take 10% to make up the rest of the blend.
Okay.
And
someone here is asking, how far does Jost Tidal Bay get distributed? Just Canada or global markets?
No global markets yet. I say that hesitating because we may have a small restaurant in Switzerland that might take some, but I wouldn't say that's widespread. We have been out west. You can find us out in Alberta, and sometimes we do send to Ontario, but we're more, and Newfoundland and New Brunswick. But most of our Tidal Bay is sold right here in Nova Scotia.
We consume it all in province happily. All right, well, if no one else has any more questions, we will go now back to you, can. I have my glass somewhat full of your Tidal Bay.
No, just give me a second.
So
That was a joke.
what?
Yeah.
I hardly heard it. Say it again.
Oh, I said I'll have to pour another one now.
Okay. So what would you like to tell us about this? What was the year like for you?
Our year was probably our best yet. It was our nicest for our Cayuga. So this blend has a little bit more Cayuga than our other years has. So you'll probably get a little bit more green apple in it this year than other years, but like less because the Cayuga's riper. Our Lacadie is very, I just say tropical. Like I'm not fancy with words, but one thing I did notice this year, you guys talk about minerality, and I don't know if it's because we were able to get everything riper, but or maybe it's my palate getting better as I've been making wine for 7 years now, but I do find that we get it. Our Lacadie's in a block right below the house, and as we were clearing some trees, we were finding that the excavator was hitting where the limestone comes to the soil here, like in some spots like 1.5 to 2 feet below. So our Lacadie is like dangerously close for like growing grapes to like having enough room to fully develop. So I do like, as I'm making it more and more, I'm really starting to notice that in it. But
definitely agree with you. There's like a flinty stoniness behind some of those tropical notes, and yeah, lovely.
And yeah, this was our first year that our small field of New York Muscat came in. So yeah, it's our first time having New York Muscat in, and it's our biggest production. I think we had 240 cases, so for us that's big. Last year I think we had 120, and the year before that we had 20 cases of. So earlier our Muscats was pretty much our one row of Zigarabi, and then like some St. Pepin. We grew more St. Pepin and Petit Milot and New York Muscat are our aromatic ones, I guess.
So all of those are in this blend?
Yep.
Okay.
For
but mostly Cayuga?
Mostly Lacadie.
Lacadie and Cayuga?
Yeah, I think it's maybe 66-ish% Lacadie. I don't have the notes with me. And then somewhere around 20-ish Cayuga, and then the rest is like a field blend of our aromatics. Like we weigh them on the scale and they just go into our one tank, and we put the chiller on it for a month or so, and away it goes.
For those people who might be on this call who haven't been up to your winery, because it's a little bit more out of the way than some of the other wineries that are clustered together, how would you describe it? Because I mean, I've been there and looked at a beautiful sunset, but
yeah, it's worth the drive. Like right now I'm working on the other side of the causeway in Mulgrave, and it's, even though it's like 45 minutes from me every day, I love it. Like I wouldn't move closer. I find it very peaceful. Like you're off the highway. Like there's eagles constantly. Like the first couple of years I had in hawks, like bird cannons going, but now like we have enough like natural birds around, like as predators, and like I just can watch eagles all day, and like I don't have to use my cannons anymore. We don't net. Like it's really, I love it out there. Very relaxing.
Yeah, it definitely feels like when you're up at your winery that you're in a really like untouched part of the province, and it feels like you stumble upon something that's really special. And the view, I'm always confused when I'm in Cape Breton. I'm like, am I looking at a lake? Am I looking at an inlet to the ocean? But like the view to the water there with the islands is like super unparalleled. And yeah, loved visiting you last summer. I haven't even had a sip of this. Should we talk about what this tastes like?
Well, you have a sip and tell me what you think.
Okay. All right.
I'll have another one. Yeah.
Ben and Gina, are you tasting along with this one too, or do you just still have your own wines?
I'm just pretending.
You're just pretending?
Wine. I wish I had the other two to taste along with.
I didn't either, I have to admit, unfortunately.
Yeah, we're
losers. No, I'm
we've
kidding.
been in pick a week or so after you guys are Lacadie, if not more, some years. So we were just getting like bottled when it was supposed to be sent out for the deadline. So I don't think it's available where you guys are yet anyway.
Okay, that's right. That's why we don't have it.
I know you went shopping for it.
And we did.
But
I think it's like peachy, appley. There's some like minerality that you can even perceive on the palate.
I didn't mean to put you in the spot there, but
Are you going to
the
taste
back of
with
ours,
me?
I think oh, I had one. Yeah, I'll have another one here in a second. I'm not good at doing the nose sniffing and the swirling, but I'm good at the swallowing, if that makes sense.
It does make
That
a lot
sounded
of
really
sense.
bad.
Yeah, it's tasting great. And you just bottled it very recently?
Yeah, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago now at the most. We bottled it, and actually we weren't even finished putting the stickers on the box. The armor truck backed up, so it went right from like the perennial bottle truck, and the guy in the armor truck was waiting, and I had to like drive my forklift that has no brakes and make my way around both big trucks and try to get it on without dropping them. just
so all these thirsty folks in Nova Scotia could get the first taste of what 2020 has to offer.
I think I'm more scared of Haley, to be honest. So
more so what?
More scared of Haley getting mad at me for missing the deadline.
I don't think she's here to hear that, but yeah, I get you. Yeah, it's so lovely to be able to taste all of these at the same time, because it's like it's cool to have this brand, this umbrella of Tidal Bay, and people get hooked on one and then they want to try all of them, because as much as they're all called Tidal Bay, they each have their own flair. They each have a different blend of things, and I think that if people decide that they like one, it's like a fun adventure to go taste all of them. And last year, I saved mine until the bubble opened up a little bit and had a tasting with some of my friends of, I think there were 13 last year. And it's amazing how, although some of the blends are very similar, how different they can be because of the terroir. But there's always there's kind of a constant throughout, but you can definitely find your favorites, but you know what to expect. So does anybody have any questions for Ken about his Tidal Bay? Let's just look at this here. Sarah says, we've got ours here and it's delish, loving it.
I don't think I think she said Eileanan and Breagha, didn't she?
She did say that, but I just didn't want to butcher it again. You have to poke at me like that. Anybody? Questions about Tidal Bay in general? Questions about tasting wine? You're welcome to throw them at us. We may be able to answer them, no promises.
Hey, I have a question, Ken.
Yes.
Do you like the blending process? Is that a fun part of your job?
It's have I told you how we wine here before? Or? They're long nights of my brother and I put in lots of overtime. Is how it is. We have a blast. We'll make a whole bunch of bottle samples, and just right from the tanks, and we take our notes. And by the end of the nights, our notes are pretty scribbly, but we keep writing down what we like best, and then we do that like every weekend till we kind of like let them sit, make a new batch where we get closer to the ones we like the best in our notes, and we just keep plugging away till we find what we like, and that's when we'll chaptalize after. We try to get like the best blend with the wine first, and then we like balance it accordingly after. Yeah, no, that's the best part of the job.
Sure.
We have no here either, so.
Before we move on to Ben, I just had a question because I was just looking at how much the wine was attaching to this glass and kind of leggy, which sometimes indicates alcohol, I think, if I'm if I'm not speaking out of turn. Was it with it being such a hot year, was it different making Tidal Bay this year in comparison to some cooler years with all the fruit potentially being riper? Did you have to pick earlier so that it would stay true to this light and fresh style? Were you okay with it being a little bit riper? Can you all kind of weigh in on that, or is that like totally a silly question?
Well, that's a good question, especially for us up here. I don't know about you guys. This is the first year we didn't have to like add fermenting sugars to get our alcohol where we wanted. Like everything came in higher, and I think our Lackady and our Frontenac, well, Frontenac's our highest sugar we get, but a lot of them are higher than we even like add up to make sure we get a minimum amount of alcohol. So it was actually wonderful. We're really excited about it.
Yeah, similar situation here. I mean, it was one of those years, it was so warm, everything was right. But when you have a lot of different varietals to work with, like some are earlier, some are later, some are kind of in between. And with the pretty cooperative fall weather, we were able to just kind of like pick things at just the right time and blend things together so that, yeah, some were a little higher alcohol than they normally would be, but there's always those later varietals that don't have the same sugars that give you that balancing out effect, so that you can still find that right number between 9 and 11% alcohol that the Tidal Bay requires. Yeah, so it was a pleasure to blend this year.
A little bit easier, or?
Yeah, I would say, and yeah, being able to pick, like knowing the grapes were ripe, being able to pick them just kind of whenever it worked. It was nice not to just be waiting for them to ripen or running away from rainstorms.
Yeah, likewise here. I think, yeah, it was a season that we, some years you're, tasting the grapes and waiting for the acids to drop into a nice range. And this year we didn't want the acids to drop too far. So, we're tasting and, and making that call as we go. But generally there was, things were coming in at a nice pace and, great aromatics. I mean, some years, for example, with the New York Muscat, which is a purple skin variety, it doesn't have a lot of color, but still has great aromatics. And other times, it's got a lot of color that comes through the juice. So that sometimes comes through in the wine. And of course the aromatics come through like crazy.
Now that your Jost Tidal Bay is warmed up a bit, I'm really smelling more of the New York Muscat, and it's like that lychee, like cotton candy kind of note that people love, that I wasn't smelling as much as I was before, but I love that, and I think so many people do. Like when we were having the tasting last year, a lot of folks love that. It's super pretty.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, compared to 2019, which I think everyone would agree was a leaner year, our Muscat percentage came way down in the blend. We didn't need as much because it was showing so much Muscat. So it's got 8% only in that blend, and yeah, it does come through.
Yeah. We've got a few questions here that before we taste Ben's Tidal Bay from Avondale Sky. Is the EB available in all NSLC stores?
I don't think it'll be in the select stores but I think last year was in all like the general stores as part of the Tidal Bay promotion. I haven't heard where it's going to be this year, but I assume it's probably the same.
Great. Chrissy is asking everyone, would you say this has been the best year for Tidal Bay so far? I guess that would be something that any of you could answer. It's definitely a different year because the acid is less maybe less pointy, right? There's like, to me, these two feel a little bit rounder.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a best vintage ever for Tidal Bay, because it is a blend. But I certainly the best in the last three. I can say that hands down. For personally,
and why is that, Ben? Can you speak a little bit more to that so people understand?
So the 2018 vintage, we got hit really hard by a frost, and depending on where you were in the province, you lost anywhere from 10 to 90% of your crop. We lost about 90 here, so it was a lean year. We were fortunate. We got even to be able to make Tidal Bay. We actually got a little bit of help from the folks up in Malagash there at Jost. They had a little bit of extra Geisenheim that they sold us just so we could make a Tidal Bay, because ours got wiped out. And then the following winter, after 2018, there was a deep freeze event, which damaged and in some cases killed a lot of the vines, but certainly knocked out a lot of the primary buds. So the crop was down again 50% or so. So a couple really light years, and fairly cool growing seasons. And because of the delay of having your primary buds killed off, your fruit basically starts growing 3 or 4 weeks later than normal. And so getting it ripe is a real struggle at that stage. So we had to hang on to things for a really, really long time in 2018, 2019, just to get them ripe enough. And the 2020 was the polar opposite of that, where it was warm and just a perfect season. I mean, personally, I think our 2020 Tidal Bay, I'd call it the best here since 2015 for me.
Really? I've always loved your Tidal Bay. It's like, I mean, I've always loved all of them, but I think that I most consistently drink yours. So you saying that this one is going to be the best one, I'm very much looking forward to getting into it, because this will be my first taste of it. And blind, I've always picked yours in a lineup as like being one of my favorites. So you saying that this is going to be one of the best ones, I believe you. Oh
no, there's nothing like setting the bar too high.
So did everyone kind of get to answer about this being the best year so far, or did you get to weigh in?
I mean, it's tricky to say it's the best year, but it was compared to 2019, I'll just echo what Ben said. I mean, I think it was a vintage that tried our patience. It was always about stopping and holding, and it's really hard. Everyone gets anxious to pick, but holding on to make sure we get that balance was key in 19, and in 20, things were ripe and kind of spaced out, so you could space things out, and it was less of it wasn't rushed, but it also wasn't a waiting game. So it was definitely the vintage was less pressure coming in, I guess. Let's put it that way.
Less scary, perhaps.
Yeah, you could spread it out a bit, so it was nice.
Leah is asking, is the required alcohol limit for Tidal Bay between 9 and 11%? Which I think she's right there. It has to be under 11, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got in trouble 2 years ago for putting 11.5 in.
Is there a best temperature for Tidal Bay? I mean, I think cold. Not cold as hell, but or not. I guess hell is not the right word, but pretty cold. What would you say the best temperature for Tidal Bay is on ice consistently?
Not that cold. This would be my answer. I think it's got some bright acidity, so that that kind of carries well. But I don't know. I'm terrible at temperatures, but not right out of the fridge. But let's say 7 degrees. I don't know. Throwing a number around. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best temperature to drink Tidal Bay is the temperature you like the most.
That's a great answer.
if I had to put a number to it, I'd probably go, like probably somewhere like 7 to 11, 7 to 12 degrees. Just as a cool climate, acidic, aromatic, you want it on the cooler end of the drinking spectrum for white wine. But most wines right out of the fridge are really dulled just by the coldness. You don't get as much off of the nose, and the palate can really just show more of the acidity, but less of kind of the roundness that can creep out with a little bit more warm.
Yeah, and I think that's totally what was happening with the Jost that we tasted first. I love seeing how it is when it's real cold, and then you have another glass and you're sitting out on the patio and it warms up a little bit, so you kind of get to taste it in all of its spectrum of glory, and like super chilled and not quite as chilled, and then a little bit warm, and you get to really enjoy all of its facets.
The evolution is amazing, isn't it? Even at over 10 minutes.
Yeah, totally. That's temperature. Steve is asking, how do you think Cape Breton Tidal Bay is different to the rest of the province?
Yeah, I actually I sent a message as we were talking too, and kind of just went back a little bit on how, depends on where you would grow it in Cape Breton. Like I'm here on overlooking the lake and I got limestone, but if I tried to plant it in Marguerite or someplace, it would be totally different. So, but just as part of our vineyard, with the lake there, because the lake last summer warmed up to 22 or 23 degrees. So like we did not get a frost until like, I think late November, maybe early December. Like I had some grapes sit, especially the Cayuga, like for days it would get up to like 10 or 11 degrees and like just slowly getting a little bit more riper all the time. So I was like, I think that helps. And you guys are probably the same in some areas down the valley too, or like, but every place is different. So it was hard to answer it, but you seem to be happy with what I wrote. I'll see if I can figure out if I missed anything of how I summarize it. But.
I think we're almost ready to taste with Ben here, but before we move on, Susan said, I stopped at the Annapolis Royal NSLC, and other than 2020 Jost, they were stocked with 2019 Tidal Bay. So the 2020 Jost is phenomenal. Yay, Gina. We are comparing 2019 and 2020 Jost Tidal Bay, so vastly different and both delicious. I've offered a good selection between NSLC, online, and Harvest. Next week, I will be able to taste along. My cellar will be stacked. Yeah, I think that you can taste differences between each year of Tidal Bay from winery to winery. They might change their blends a little bit depending on the year. You can be sure to kind of get the same style of wine, but you get to enjoy slight differences, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So yeah, that's
great.
Good drinking. All right, let's move on to Avondale Sky. For those who may not have it, if you're looking for it, this is what it looks like. Slightly different than other years. Switched up the label. Looking good. We got the wave. We got the tide on there. So let's go, Ben.
All right. Well,
Avondale Sky, Tidal Bay.
Yeah. So as we've discussed, 20 vintage was a pretty hot one. I would argue maybe the hottest in my winemaking time here in Nova Scotia. And so for us this year, we the varietal blend is a little bit different. Still trying to stay within our style of kind of less on the aromatic varieties and more just kind of on the classic sort of main varietals. But with all the heat we had, the Lac Blanc and the Osceola Muscat came in much lower acidity than they normally would. And so we had a grower who had quite a bit of Frontenac Blanc, which we hadn't worked too much with before, but it's a much higher acidity varietal. So there's a little bit more of that in there this year.
It It definitely feels like, now that I'm tasting them all side by side, that everybody, because of it being such a warm year, it all feels a little bit like, would you say that like the body of all of your wines is a little bit more than previous years?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a richness to this year's Tidal Bay that I think you will find in everybody's. They're like, despite having that sort of restricted alcohol range for Tidal Bay, I think, where in some years you might find people closer to 9, I think this year you'll probably see a lot of them closer to the 11. And even that little bit of extra alcohol can give a little bit more body and richness on the palate. Yeah. I think you definitely find that, like certainly with mine this year. It can almost come across a little bit sweeter than normal, despite the fact that the actual sugar, like leftover residual sugar in the wine, isn't really any different from most years for us, because of that really ripe fruit, because of that richness from a little bit more alcohol and just really ripe grapes. You get that kind of mouth coating effect that kind of makes it seem a little bit like it could be sweeter, but it's still got that nice crisp acidic backbone that all Tidal Bays have. For mine, I find it's got a lot of different fruit on the nose. There's definitely the classic kind of apple and pear and peach, and then there's a little bit of guava that kind of comes out now and again. Just one of the yeasts I use for some of the grapes kind of gives that character to it. And then that Frontenac Blanc component, like I found really lent a floral note to the wine. I'm calling it lilac, but you may disagree. I think when it comes to wine descriptors, like some are very technical and some are like actual kind of flavor compounds that exist in the wine. But a lot of wine tasting is really just your own personal experience, sort of what smells, what it reminds you of that you've had. And so for me, I was calling it lilac. Somebody else might call it rose or lily of the valley or what have you, but definitely something floral there.
It's pretty. It's definitely very pretty. I'm sure that all of you have had the question at some point in your careers, going like, oh yeah, is there lilac in this, or like, is there XYZ fruit? And it's just a descriptor for everyone listening, that it allows you to describe the kinds of wines that you like, and you like wines that are floral, or you like wines that are aromatic, and hopefully that when you're looking for something, that you can find it a little bit more easily if you have the kinds of descriptors to tell people what you like, what you want, whether you're at a Bishop Cellar or whether you're sitting on a patio next week looking for a crisp lilac wine.
Looking for a table.
I was going to say grapes are amazing, huh, Ben? Both in, individually as varieties, and then during ferment and then aging, the aromatics and the differences that can come out from all those processes is amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, everybody makes wine differently. Like for my Tidal Bay blend every year, we do a combination of ferments that go completely dry, which give you a very different aromatic expression in the wine from the other ferments that I do, where I stall them out with a fair bit of residual sugar. And so those stalled ferments, they also they give some of the sweetness to the wine, but they also give a lot more of that primary fruit character that the grape had that it can lose over time with the ferment. When you ferment a wine completely dry, just through the action of the ferment and all of the kind of CO2 bubbling out, it can actually blow off a lot of the lovely aromatics that can be in that wine. And so with stalling some of the components of the blend, you get to capture some of that before it disappears. But at the same time, dry ferments, when you ferment something completely dry, you get these different, more evolved characters that the yeast sussed out of the grape. And yeah, like Gina said, every grape has different precursors to different flavor compounds that you really you can't make a Geisenheim taste like a Lackady, and vice versa. They are all very different grapes that produce different aromatics and flavors. And that's part of the fun of our jobs, of getting to put them all together in a way that works for us in this blend every year. And, it's job one for us here at Avondale, is figuring out the Tidal Bay blend and getting it the best it can be, and still within sticking to our sort of in-house style.
With you on that one. It's wine number one.
Yeah.
Ben, one of my favorite things about your Tidal Bay from year to year, and maybe you disagree with this year, is that I think that there's always a lot of complexity, and there are all the fruit characters and floral characteristics that you were talking about. But I find that you always keep some sort of like kind of green, kind of maybe slightly vegetal note that like appears in the background that keeps it kind of like a little bit savory for me, and that's what I really love about it.
Yeah, that really comes down to certain varietals and yeast selection in the blend. So like mine this year, it's a blend of 5 grapes, but it's a blend of 9 separate ferments. And with my L'Acadie and my Vidal dry components that go into Tidal Bay, I use these New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc yeasts that do kind of pull out a little bit of that kind of Sauv Blanc-y, grassy sort of character.
Okay, it's not all in my mind, because literally when I smelt that, I was like, there's something going on there that reminds me of Sauvignon Blanc, but it's not like right up in your face. It's kind of like what I smell afterwards. Like it's like the typical Tidal Bay, and then I'm like, oh no, but there's something else going on.
Yeah, and I think maybe this year, it just because the fruit was so ripe, it leans a little more into the guava, boxwoody kind of thing, and less into the gooseberry cut grass kind of thing in a cooler vintage. But I still get it. Yeah.
It's still you. It's still very much in that line of your style, which I very much enjoy.
Right.
So just to remind everybody, there are 20 allowable grape varieties in Tidal Bay. Everyone can, and there are different percentages that you can use of each one. So I think if you wanted to, you could use all 20. I don't think anyone's doing that, but you kind of get to play with those. Winemakers get to experiment depending what they have planted on their properties, and make something that adheres to the guidelines of the Appalachian wine. Is there like a favorite thing that you would pair this with, Ben?
I actually love this with spicy breaded chicken wings. It's not.
You would.
Not pairing. But no, I was a friend of mine in the city years back had a little wine and food tasting where he wanted to taste spicy food with different wines. And so everybody brought a few different wines, and he cooked up a whole bunch of different spicy things. And I brought a few Nova Scotia wines and the Tidal Bay and the Bliss from here in particular, thinking that lower alcohol and that crisp acidity might work. And I was very pleasantly right about it, I guess. I was almost shocked in how well not a lot of wine holds up particularly well to spice, because the alcohol can really amplify the heat and make your mouth just on fire. But the lower alcohol, higher acidity, especially when they've got a bit of residual sugar to kind of cool you down as well, those wines can really handle that kind of heat, which is lovely, and makes them so much more versatile. And so if people out there find acidity a little bit too much sometimes, I think the answer is just to find the right food to pair it with, and then you'll love it.
Amen, Ben. Amen.
Yeah, definitely. I always, pairing like with like is always good. So it's like if you have a high acidity food and a high acidity wine, or a light food, obviously our seafood is really great with so many of the Tidal Bays, but sometimes something with high fat or high spice is a really great thing to pair with this too, because just really cleanses the palate and makes you feel refreshed. And if anything, like this is maybe one of the most versatile wines with food, so you can hardly go wrong. We have a few questions going on here. All right, we've got people saying this Avondale is so good. Steve with all the questions. With 20 allowable grapes, how important is the blending process for each of the winemakers? I think we kind of like touched on that, but if anyone wants to add anything in there on that one.
I mean, I can jump at that one if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So, even though there are a certain number of allowable varieties that we can use, they're grown in different areas, so that right away makes them different. And we don't blend them in the same proportion either. We don't use the same fermentation conditions. We don't use the same yeast. So even if we had, I would argue, if Ken, Ben, and I blended a wine with the exact same, so Lackady, Muscat, Cayuga, and GM318, the same percentages, we taste the wines, and the I think the style, the terroir would come through from where they're grown in different areas, but also the style, I think, of the winemaker also comes through the individual sort of style. So blending is really important. I guess I gave you the reason why you do the same blend, you can make a completely different wine. But I hope that helped answer the question.
We'll let Steve chime in if that helped him or not. Ashley says, loving this Avondale, so smooth. So smoother than usual, perhaps. Rebecca Dory says, is the Avondale Sky mostly Frontenac grapes? I always think of Tidal Bay and seafood. Is it mostly Frontenac?
So the Lackady, sorry, I had a little momentary blip there with the connection. The Avondale is most breakdown Lackady, 23 Frontenac, so it is the next highest. And then there's Osceola and Vidal in at 15 each, and then 10% guys and I'm 318.
Great. Jost was a winner of the Lieutenant Governor's Award in 2019. How do you become a winner of the Lieutenant Governor Award?
Oh, wow. That's a complex question. I think all great wines are about balance. So if you can hit the balance between acidity and sweetness and aromatics and complexity and alcohol and weight and acidity, I think those are the makings of a great wine. And I think that's simply put.
Margot just said Avondale Sky is mostly Lackady, like most, if not all, of the Tidal Bays, which is totally true. Which kind of brings me to a question. Maybe if you could just speak to the importance of Lackady and why it, grows so well here. Why it kind of like reflects a lot of what Nova Scotia is, why it's the most blended grape in a lot of the Tidal Bays.
I think for Lackady, I mean there are Tidal Bays out there that don't use any Lackady, so it's not a requirement, but it is definitely Nova Scotia's probably most grown and most blended grape for this wine. I would say that what really makes it so usable in Tidal Bay and in other things is its versatility. It's a grape that you can do a lot of different things with. It ripens well in this climate. Like it's a relatively early ripener for us. So that allows you to pick it, and it ripens, like its flavors ripen very early. So it allows you to pick it earlier for different styles of wine and later for other styles. To really express something very different. It can handle some oak. It can be picked earlier for sparkling wine. It can handle a little bit of residual sugar, and it's great dry. It can handle various different yeasts that express different sort of flavor precursors that exist in the grape. So I think
it's a workhorse. It sounds like.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. It's a very complex a blend of different, like the grape itself. I think it's 17 different grape species crossed together to make the L'Acadie Blanc varietal. So
who created it?
It was made in Vineland, Ontario. And they found their climate was too hot, and it grew too ripened too quickly, over-ripened, and didn't produce a very good wine. And I think somebody at the research station in Kentville, if I'm not mistaken, had the foresight to give it a shot out here, and it really just grows perfectly in this climate.
And it became one of our most grown grapes.
I think another good part of it is just growing it in the vineyard and disease resistance and how it wants to grow straight up and like easier for a lot of the growers to manage, because we don't spray ours at all. It's for us it's carefree. I just got to let the first I forget what they're called, but arm catch the first wire, and then she goes up. Like it's pretty nice in the vineyard for us anyway.
Yeah. Just to let folks know out there that might not have as much knowledge about wine, some grape varieties do not grow well in Nova Scotia. Some are very hard to grow. Our growing season is shorter than other places, not quite as hot, and because our winters are so cold, there are some vines that, like, would you say just like wouldn't be able to stand the climate here, like that would be killed throughout the winter.
Yep.
So there are things that just can't be grown here. So winemakers and vineyard owners and people who are managing the vineyards really have to pick very specifically what they plant and what they grow here, so that it's a huge decision, and people need to be very strategic about that, because it would be very difficult otherwise. So I think that people might not realize that there are certain vinifera grapes that maybe are just way too hectic to grow here, whereas like picking something like L'Acadie, it's like, oh, beautiful, we can get fruit every year. That's really nice. I'll go back to the questions, and then we can talk a little bit about the history, or maybe there aren't any questions. Do people have any more questions for Ben? With the NS reopening announcement plans today, we're looking forward to being able to visit you all soon when it's safe to do so. Well, that's really nice. Yes, of course. Thank you. Okay, it seems like we are caught up with questions. I mean, we'll take a few more after we talk a bit about the history of Tidal Bay. I mean, we've touched on a lot of things throughout this, but we could talk a little bit more about that. So, especially for Ben and Gina, what was the purpose of creating this appellation wine? Like, when you all first sat together, why did you want to do this? Where did you see it going?
I mean, I think a lot of it was us as winemakers recognizing the potential in Nova Scotia to produce something really great and really unique, and really wanting to find a way to express that as a unified group. I think. I mean, it was the Winery Association. It was their a brainchild sort of initially to get together to do this, and it's always been a very collaborative industry out here in Nova Scotia. We always work well together. I can't count the number of times that I've sent a text or got on the phone when I needed something or somebody needed something from me for the winery. Like all of us, it's, oh, my pump broke down, help, or, oh, I'm a little short on this, can you help me out, or I ran out of corks, whatever it is. everybody in the industry is always there to step up. And I think we wanted to really find a way to kind of showcase that a collaborative nature in the wine, as well as really highlight Nova Scotia's unique terroir and our really cool white wines that we do here.
And I think a way to highlight our terroir is to maybe stop focusing directly on the grapes themselves in some ways, and focusing on a blend that pushes forward that terroir. So I know we do love to talk about what blend we use for Tidal Bay and things, but it is about expressing Nova Scotia, and having a blend maybe makes it less complicated in a way to describe, and it's definitely easier to talk about one wine for several wineries than to talk about maybe XYZ wineries have these varieties planted, and then another winery has other varieties planted. To talk about one wine that expresses Nova Scotia is so simple.
Yeah, having that signature style is nice. I mean, before Tidal Bay, you'd go to any winery and you would find a Lac-a-Di Blanc, but if you liked one from one, you might go and the other one might be oak aged, and maybe that's not your cup of tea, or maybe you prefer the oak aged and then you try one that's a little bit sweet and you don't like that. So with Tidal Bay, it's going to taste like a Tidal Bay every time. And so, yeah, that simplification, just that ease of being able to pick up a bottle that says Tidal Bay from any winery and knowing exactly what's going to be in that bottle.
It's funny that you say that, because like we're talking about all the nuances and differences as we go through these, but I was trying to think of an analogy about it, and the first thing that came to mind to me when I was thinking about our tasting today was like, you always know when you're watching a Disney movie, but every Disney movie has a different story. Yeah. Like there's a way that you kind of know, there's a feel, there are certain things that you have to tick off. There are certain things that you know are going to be there, but it's never exactly the same. But you get to have that feeling every time. And I think that's like, I don't know, that's the only thing that I could think of. Anyone? Analogies on Tidal Bay and how they're all different, but all kind of similar?
I like your movie reference. Disney movie works, Marvel movie, that could work too.
Maybe Pixar.
Yeah.
So we've had a long, not a long history, but it's been 10 years of Tidal Bay tastings, whether it's tastings at the wineries with everyone once they finish their Tidal Bay together. I've been to a few of those. 12 Tides has been such an amazing event over the years that unfortunately we've not been able to have, but I'm sure the next one will be just a rip-roaring good time next year. Do you have any like favorite Tidal Bay memories or things from different tastings, or like kind of aha moments of Tidal Bay?
I can definitely echo your sentiment that 12 Tides, I always look forward to that event, maybe above all each year. And primarily because I get to go around the room and try everybody else's Tidal Bay, usually for the first time. It's exciting and fun to do. I think memories of Tidal Bay, it was interesting, like to see it evolve from the first vintage, where with like one or two exceptions, they were all really quite similar. I think most people were working with only 2 or 3 varietals back then, and you really, it was harder to discern if you were to blind taste them. And I know we did this a few years back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was sometimes hard to even pick out your own amongst the bunch with how similar they could be. And then with each year, each winery seems to find like a little bit, like just like slide a little bit more into their specific style, while still keeping within Tidal Bay. It's really been super fun to see how each winery has found their little stamp to put on their Tidal Bay. to make it their own, while still being, a classic Tidal Bay. That's been really fun to try and to get, to sort of pick ones styles that you really enjoy each year. It's neat, and I think probably my favorite thing about the 12 Tides event would be walking around the room and hearing people say, "Oh, this is my favorite, and this is my favorite," and there was never winery left out from somebody's favorite. Everybody found a favorite and they were all. There wasn't like any clear one Tidal Bay that was liked way better than another. It was everybody found a favorite in the room, and that I think really shows that the idea, the concept of the appellation worked. If everybody can find a Tidal Bay from a different winery that's their favorite, I really loved hearing that.
I think for me, just to echo Ben's point about getting to walk around the room and chat with some of the winemakers that you sometimes don't see on a regular basis. I always see Ken. This is what I was going to say. Ken and I always have a little chat at 12 Tides. So I haven't had a good chat with you face to face in a couple of years. So I'll look forward to when we can taste and all chat together. But one of my favorite memories, I think, goes way back when this task of coming together as winemakers and coming and trying to take this concept of Tidal Bay, which wasn't called Tidal Bay at the time, it was called our Appalachian wine, and then move it into a reality. Ben and I were just talking about this beforehand, but in 2009, after the vintage, or early 2010, a lot of the winemakers were called to bring varietals. So, Lac-Qui-Dix from the harvest, and Sayvel and Vidal, all the varieties, New York Muscat, into a big boardroom table where Peter Gamble had been staying. It was here in the Valley. And
for those who don't know, can you just kind of explain maybe Peter Gamble's importance and how he plays a role in this?
Yeah, sorry about that. Peter Gamble is a consultant, and he consults for a couple of wineries here in Nova Scotia, and he's got his roots in Ontario, and he worked with VQA. So it was quite familiar with setting up, I guess, regulations and whatnot in the wine world. And he was basically hired, I think, in a short way of saying it, by the Winery Association of Nova Scotia, as it was called at the time, to help us develop an Appalachian wine. And so he was a facilitator in many ways. So we all came together with these bottles of, unfiltered tank samples, some dry, some sweeter, and we sort of, I don't like the expression, I was going to say duked it out. We did not duke it out. It was a really great conversation. We had a great discussion about, someone would pour, let's try some Lac-Qui-Dix, let's try some Vidals. And we started to develop the framework of what Tidal Bay would be like, what varieties you could have at higher percentages, what varieties you could have at lower percentages, where should the acidity be, where should the alcohol be. It was really collaborative and continues to be that way, but really fun, put simply.
That sounds like a really great time. Ken, do you have any memories? I mean, I know that you've maybe come into this a little bit later than Gina and Ben, but have you felt a good vibe?
Yes, I love the vibe at the beginning. My first, I think, 12 Tides, I had just kind of purchased this spot, and we were seeing what we had here, and I'd love going to 12 Tides, taste what everybody had, and that's probably why I was bugging Gina and should see me every year. But I think yours was different at that time. I think you used mostly Sayvel, or that was your dominant one. I don't know if it still is, but
yeah, for Gasparo. Yeah, sorry, Gasparo, Vidal, and Sayvel. You're right.
And actually, for the first couple of years, as we were trying to see what we had, going to those tastings and trying to see what I liked the best was kind of determine how we pulled out a lot of the old vines and replanted, and then used those guidelines, I guess, to go forward. So yeah, it's been fun. It was fun to go there for the first couple of years as a participant, I guess, and then I think the very last one we finally had our own table there, so that was nice.
I've loved it every single year, and I love seeing it just get better and better. I think that it's been super quality the last few years, and there's a tasting panel for those of you watching that taste all of the Tidal Bays every year and see if the Tidal Bays that all the wineries are producing really adhere to what the style is supposed to be, so that you don't pick up a Tidal Bay and you go, oh, well, this really doesn't feel like, oh, this is super rich, or it isn't acidic, or it isn't bright, and it doesn't reflect the style. So people make sure that it does reflect that style. And I think that it's been so delicious the last few years. And one of my favorite things to do every year is obviously 12 Tides, and doing a blind tasting at the Bishop's Cellar table. I'll go around and talk to all the winemakers and see everybody, and I love doing that. But then doing the blind tasting, where I really like not being biased, because it's just not knowing who it's from, not knowing who I'm better pals with. It's just like, this is the one that tastes the best to me, and then I know what I want to buy maybe for the rest of the summer. And everyone's palate's different, so I'm not saying that it's the best one. It's the best one to me. Is always super fun. Shout out to the folks at Bishop's for always doing that, and always being carrying quite a few of the Tidal Bays. I know that last year they did a box where you could just get all of the Tidal Bays. I'm not sure if they're doing that again, but I'm sure that they'll carry quite a few of them. Yeah, so I wonder if there are any more questions here. I'm just going to take a quick look. There are just some like loving this event, excited to come see you kind of things going on. Kane says, and I think we've kind of answered this, but if anyone wants to add more, who was responsible for the inception of the Tidal Bay appellation? It would be the Winery Association and Peter Gamble, or
Yeah, initially the Winery Association themselves, so the group of owners of the wineries, wanted to put something together to sort of just describe Nova Scotia in the form of a wine, and elevate what was already starting to happen. And so they had a lot of discussions, I think, over many years before even getting to the stage of bringing Peter Gamble on board. And he had already been consulting for another winery at the time, and had already had a pretty clear vision of what he thought would work best for us. And then through the process of the Appellation Implementation Committee that Gina and I were part of, we met a bunch of times and kind of really hammered out the details based on Peter's initial vision, but then with all of our input.
If anyone watching has any questions, please feel free to chime in, like kind of questions to wrap things up. And while people think of their questions, I'm going to put something out to everybody just so you can pump up, other wineries. I would love for each of you to go through and tell me generally one of your favorite Nova Scotia wines that is not your own, or not from any wineries that are associated with you. And then one of your other, maybe another Tidal Bay that you also pick up.
Where do we start?
Yeah. Anywhere.
It's hard to pick a favorite. People ask me a lot of times, like, what's your favorite wine you make? And I can never answer that question. And so asking me to pick...
And we don't want you to.
No, and asking to pick a favorite from other wineries is even harder, because there's so much more to choose from.
And we know you're all good friends, and this will break hearts, but you just...
So I think...
pump up somebody's tires.
Yeah, I'm gonna base my favorite on what I bought like a half case of most recently, which I've been really enjoying, and that would be the rosé from Mercator. I think Gina, you were maybe the person who came up with that blend, and it's a really nice. I like a nice dry rosé. Personally, that's the style I love, and every time of year is good for rosé, but especially this time of year. So that's one of my current favorites.
It's super delicious. I've had a few bottles. What's the blend in that rosé?
Oh wow.
Okay, maybe you have a lot of wines. That's
no,
a lot of pressure.
I'll give you a rough one. The rosé portion is definitely based on Leon Malo, and we've got some Lacadie in there, a little bit of Muscat, and some other varieties, I think. But those are the ones that stick out right away. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Ben. That's nice. It's a Becca Griffin, who's our vineyard manager and our winemaker at Mercator, and my baby. So thanks.
Ben, and sorry, it was your favorite wine and then your favorite other Tidal Bay.
Oh, right. My favorite other Tidal Bay. I don't know how to choose that one. It depends on the time of year. I lean towards the ones that are sort of probably the most different from mine. So I think I would choose the ones that are the most aromatic. So to me, that would be both Grand Pré and Gaspereau. Really highlight that the kind of muscatty aromatic, which is kind of almost on the opposite end of the spectrum from mine. But don't ask me to pick between those two.
So for those of you listening, if you're more into I was saying that maybe yours is has some green notes. What Ben means by the more aromatic ones, the more muscat forward ones, they have that lychee, maybe cotton candy kind of backbone or note, which a lot of people really, really gravitate towards and really love. And muscat is such a pretty grape. Who wants to go next? Ken, do you wanna tell us about some of your favorite wines in the province, some of your favorite Tidal Bays?
Yeah, same as kind of Ben, I guess. I drink a lot of Nova Scotia wines, and it's hard to pick one. I think the last time I went down the valley, I bought one from Lacadie Vineyards, one of Bruce's sparklings that was probably the nicest sparkling I ever drank. So that would be my last favorite. And then my Tidal Bay favorites, that while I was always around Gina's table, I think she had me early on, but I think the last time we had 12 Tides, I really liked Planter's Ridge. I think they had a great one. So,
and Planter's Ridge, I mean, maybe it's changed from year to year, but theirs has quite a bit of muscat in it as well. It is a little bit more floral, more aromatic. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I'm not sure what their blend is, to be honest. Gina, you might know. You look like you're nodding.
Yeah, I think actually, I mean, they may have muscat in it, and I don't know for sure, but I thought they also had Frontenac Blanc as a major component of their aromatic profile.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think, Ben?
Is that both Frontenac Gris and Blanc, I think, are in their blend, and that's one of their more unique components, I think.
Yeah, and I think they hang their Frontenacs longer too. They really try to get it into the tropical zone, if I recall. Oh, someone has the answer. Great. Lacadie, we were right, Ben, though. The two varieties.
And Chardonnay.
Chardonnay.
Yeah.
And Chardonnay in there too.
And
so Lacadie, Frontenac Blanc, Frontenac Gris, Céval, New York Muscat, Chardonnay for planters. And it's the driest.
That's been a running theme, I think, for them as well, generally speaking.
Yeah. And echoing your sentiment there, Ken, always love a traditional method from Bruce. He's been doing it for a long time, and he's damn good at it. A lot of value there. All right, Gina, what's up?
Yeah. Just hanging. Yeah, it is tough. It is really tough to choose one. But I think, Ben, you had said that early on, you sometimes, we found it as winemakers hard to pick out our own wines, sometimes early on. I do find, I do tend toward an aromatic Tidal Bay. That's what I gravitate toward. And in a couple of blind tastings, I've confused mine with this wine, and not because of that. I really, I just like aromatic Tidal Bays. And so Grand Pré, Jörg's Tidal Bay, I tend to gravitate toward. I find he's got a great balance between the aromatics, which include muscat, but a weightiness on the palate that he nails every year. And I really appreciate his Tidal Bay. I appreciate everyone's, but that was the one I purchased most recently. So if we're gonna go with that, that's great.
Yeah, in my blind tasting last year, several of us picked Grand Pré as our favorite, and I think especially last year was showing like super well. Mm-hmm. Beyond Tidal Bay, what are you reaching for in Nova Scotia?
I think there's going to be a theme here, just by chance, because we picked up 6 bottles of Grand Pré Ortega recently. So my husband bought it, and again, there's a richness and an aromatic component to Ortega that I really love. And I think there's another thing that draws me to that. I remember a long time ago when they first planted Ortega, and I had the first taste of it in 06 from the 06 vintage. And it was unlike any other Nova Scotian wine I had at that time, and so tropical and rich, and that was a memory maker.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The first time I had Ortega was when I worked at Obledy Wine Bar, and I think it was maybe one of Mike Main Guy's Ortegas from Luckett Vineyards, and that must have been like 2012, 2013. And I was blown away. I thought like, oh, if Nova Scotia can make wine like this, I'm here for it. Like pineapple, mango, but like not too sweet, some rich mouthfeel and stuff. So if you folks out there have not had a single varietal Ortega, maybe it's time. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, agreed with that. But I don't think I've had Jörg's Ortega in a bit, so I'll check that out. Gina, I almost dropped something. All right, does anybody watching have any more questions? Will the L'Acadie and the Church Tidal Bays be available at the NSLC soon? I don't think any of us can really answer that question here, unfortunately. You'll just have to keep looking for those. And I don't think anyone's really asked anything else. I don't know if the person hosting us here would be willing to open up everyone's video or something like that so we can all wave bye to each other and keep drinking our Tidal Bays at home. But it'd be nice to kind of see a couple people's faces and maybe say like a goodbye and a thank you. I don't know if we can make that happen. I don't even know how to view that, to be honest with you. I'm gonna try and do it. Show thumbnail video, view, gallery. Oh, there we go. Okay, we got some people. All right, right on. Turn your videos on so we can see all your faces. Thank you so much for coming. Again, this is one of 5 tastings. If you want to taste along with any other, the schedule is up online. I'm sure all the winemakers would be really excited for you to show up. Keep supporting local, keep drinking Tidal Bay, keep being proud of the wine that Nova Scotia makes. We are doing really incredible things here, and I think that throughout the year there's something for people to choose. Obviously Tidal Bay is an amazing summer wine, but there's so much. We do so great. Thank you, Ken, Gina, Ben. You're awesome. I can't wait to keep drinking this. And any closing remarks from you folks?
No, I had fun. I wasn't.
Cheers. That's what I was going to say, Ben.